Amber called her uncle, said we're up here for the holiday. Jane and I were having solstice now, we need a place to stay. And her Christian loving uncle watched his wife hang Mary on a tree. He watched his son hang candy canes all made with red dye numbers 3. He told his niece it's Christmas Eve. I know our life is not your style. She said Christmas is like solstice and we'll miss you and it's been a while. So the Christians and the pagans sat together at the table, finding faith and common ground, the best that they were able. Just before the meal was served, hands were held and prayers were said, sending hope for peace on earth and all the gods and goddesses. The food was great, the tree plugged in, the meal had gone without a hitch, till Jimmy turned to Amber and said, is it true that you're a witch? His mom jumped up and said, the pies are burning, and she hit the kitchen. And it was Jane who spoke and said, it's true, your cousin's not a Christian. But we love trees, we love the snow, the friends we have, the world we share. And you find magic from your God, and we find magic everywhere. So the Christians and the pagans sat together at the table, finding faith and common ground, the best that they were able. And where does magic come from? I think magic's in the learning. 'Cause now Christians sit with pagans, only pumpkin pies are burning. Amber tried to do the dishes, her aunt said, really no, don't bother. Amber's uncle saw how Amber looked like Tim and like her father. Thought about his brother, how they hadn't spoken for a year. He thought he'd call him up and say, it's Christmas and your daughter's here. He thought of fathers, sons, and brothers, and saw his own son tug his sleeve, saying, can I be a pagan? Dad said, we'll discuss it when they leave. So the Christians and the pagans sat together at the table, finding faith and common ground, the best that they were able. And lighting trees in darkness, learning new ways from the old, and making sense of history and drawing warmth out of the cold.
Good morning, and welcome to the live stream service of the First Unitarian Church of Hobart, Indiana. My name is John Halstead. We are a religious community of people with diverse beliefs and shared values. Our diverse beliefs are expressed in our 6 sources, and our shared values are expressed in our 7 principles, both of which can be found online. Together, we strive to grow spiritually, build community, and live our values in the world. We are currently in search for a full-time minister. When we do not have a minister in the pulpit, we invite members or guests to share a special message with us. This is one such Sunday, and we will hear from my family, the Halsteads. During this time of responsible social distancing, we are striving to maintain the authenticity of our services. So we want to draw your attention to several parts of our service today. The bell you heard ringing was our actual church bell, which was recorded by Bob Allen. The chalice you see being lit today is our actual chalice in our chapel, which will be lit by James Johnson. The music you hear is recorded each week by our music director, Jeremy Jacobson. And if you're willing and able, we invite you to leave your cameras on so that your fellow congregants can see you, just as they would if you were physically present. There will be a time in the service when you will all be unmuted briefly to say good morning to one another. And the art that you see is a generous gift of Pi Luna. We are currently streaming on Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube. Our service is recorded and will be made available for future viewing on Facebook, YouTube, and the church website. Excuse me. We will be holding a special congregational meeting and vote next Sunday, April 11th, 2021, immediately following our service. We will vote on whether to stop the search for a minister or continue the search for a minister. Prior to the vote, we will discuss our financial situation, the costs and consequences of this decision. Today, please take a deep breath now and join us in a spirit of reverence as we listen to our prelude. Please join us now in lighting our chalice. The words are printed on your screen. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together. Today is Easter in the Christian tradition. I'm sorry, let me back up. Our service today is going to be a little different in other ways. In place of a sermon, we're going to have a longer story, which is performed by my family, myself, my wife Ruth, and our children William and Katya. And you'll see that we're on the screen. Our names are a little different. I'm playing the part of Yahweh, and everybody else is playing a different part. So today is Easter in the Christian tradition. Easter, like many Christian holidays, is closely related to the pagan traditions which it supplanted. Easter falls on the Sunday after the Jewish Passover, which falls on the first Friday after the full moon, after the spring equinox, the new moon, because the ancient Jews used a lunar calendar. The spring equinox is the official start of spring and occurs when the days and nights are of equal length, hence the name equinox or equal night. The spring equinox was the new year throughout much of the Near East in ancient times. In many ancient pagan myth cycles, there is a god or goddess who dies in the summer and autumn, and is reborn at the winter solstice or the spring equinox. Often they are paired as a male and female couple. Examples include the Sumerian Inanna and Dumuzi, the Babylonian Ishtar and Tammuz, both of whom are mentioned in the Old Testament, the Egyptian Isis and Osiris, and the Phrygian Cybele and Attis. And maybe more familiar to a general audience, the Greek Demeter and Persephone, and many others. These deities embodied the life of plants and animals upon which humans depend. Both Easter and the spring equinox celebrate birth, renewal, and the cycle of life and death. Seen from one perspective, Jesus is a continuation of this mythical tradition. As you probably know, we are a mixed faith family. We have been at various times Mormon, non-denominational Christian, pagan, agnostic, and atheist. In our family on the spring equinox, when the kids were young, we would tie bright ribbons to garden tools and plant seeds in starter pots for later transplanting into the garden. And then on Easter, we would sometimes find a Christian church and join that worship. Our service today brings together elements of both Christian and pagan myth. We will open today with one of my favorite UU hymns, which has a spring theme, and we're going to close with a Christian hymn. Our opening hymn will be Rising Green, hymn 1068. Please join Jeremy Jacobson and Maggie Reister in singing Rising Green.
Wonders, my
Please join us now in our affirmation of faith. The words are printed on your screen. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Now everyone will be unmuted briefly to say good morning to one another.
Happy Easter.
Morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Happy
Easter.
Happy Easter, everybody.
Beautiful day. Go outside. Thank you for the service.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Very appropriate.
So excited.
Now is the time in our service when we take a moment to share joys and concerns which have arisen in the previous week. We believe that a joy shared is multiplied and a burden shared is lessened. As the music plays, you can type your joys and concerns in the chat box. Your joys and concerns will not be made a part of the recording, which will be shared publicly. We hold in our hearts both the joys and sorrows which were spoken, as well as those which were too tender to share. And again, feel free to continue to put them, your joys and sorrows, in the chats as the service goes on. To introduce the next song, I want to tell you a story about our family trip to a festival in the spring of 2016. The festival is called Wild Goose, and it's held in Hot Springs, North Carolina, snuggled in a valley in the Smoky Mountains. I'd been to pagan festivals before, but Wild Goose is a Christian festival and a largely evangelical Christian festival, but it was like no Christian gathering I had ever experienced. I found out about the festival from some pagan friends, actually, and I was surprised that pagans would feel welcome at a Christian festival. Then I heard Kristen Tippett interview the Indigo Girls, the band, at the Wild Goose Festival, and I decided I had to check this out. And I was amazed by what I found. First of all, the Wild Goose is not just LGBT welcoming, it's LGBT affirming. There were openly gay and trans people, not just in attendance, but highlighted as speakers and leading workshops. I recall specifically one speaker saying, "Because we're Christian, we honor your pronouns." Think about that for a moment. Because we're Christian, we honor your pronouns. In addition, racial equity was very much on everyone's minds and tongues. People were reacting to the recent police shootings of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile. A call was made to a Christian minister in Minnesota where Castile was shot, and it was broadcast from the main stage. Several presenters, both white people and people of color, spoke passionately in support of Black Lives Matter. This was 2016. And far from being climate change deniers, this community took the reality of climate change as a starting point for their activism. While most of the talk was framed in one way or another by the biblical narrative, I didn't feel like I was getting hit over the head by the Bible. And the Jesus I heard talked about was mostly Jesus, the social reformer and the political radical. I was a little surprised how much I enjoyed the Christian music. Although I didn't share their theology and their religious language was not my own, I felt there was something universal about the emotions behind the music, a hope for liberation and for grace. One of the best parts of the experience for me was singing "I'll Fly Away" and "This Little Light of Mine" in the dark during a nightly gathering called Beer and Hymns. Many of the workshops were very pagan-y, in my opinion. They had like the divine feminine, hiking and gardening as spiritual practices, and even tattoos as a form of spirituality. All were workshop themes. And honestly, I saw more acceptance for pagans at this Christian festival than I'd ever seen for Christians at pagan events. There were not only pagans, but there were also atheists who gathered in a workshop called Life After Faith. One of the main draws for the Wild Goose for me was that the Indigo Girls were headlining, and of course they played Closer to Fine. What I didn't expect was that the opening act would be Dar Williams singing "The Pagans and the Christians," a song I'd only ever heard in pagan circles. It's about a young pagan woman who visits her Christian family over Christmas. And that wasn't even the best part, because when she got to the verse which says, "Sending hope for peace and earth to all their gods and goddesses," everyone around me cheered. After that, my mind was completely blown. I just kept asking myself, like, where am I? And what is this place? And who are these people? For someone who had been wounded by my Christian upbringing, this was a deeply healing experience for me. I didn't reconvert to Christianity, but it's not an overstatement to say that my faith in Christianity was restored. I know that the Wild Goose attendees represent a very small part of Christendom, but 3,500 people in one place is nothing to scoff at. I decided I could no longer talk about Christianity writ large like it's the antithesis of everything that I valued. There was way too much overlap between the Christianity I saw at Wild Goose and the paganism that I embraced for me to continue to vilify Christians in the way that I had in the past. So even though it's Easter and not Christmas, both Easter and Christmas are pagan or Christian holidays with pagan origins. So I contacted Dar Williams and requested permission to play the pagans and the Christians here today. And you heard a version of it by Jeremy before the service started. And I want to play Dar Williams' version now.
Called your uncle, said we're up here for the holiday. Jane and I were having solstice, now we need a place to stay. And her Christ-loving uncle watched his wife hang Mary on a tree. He watched his son hang candy canes all made with red dye number 3. He told his niece it's Christmas Eve. I know our life is not your style. She said Christmas is like solstice and we miss you and it's been a while. So the Christians and the pagans sat together at the table, finding faith and common ground the best that they were able. Just before the meal was served, hands were held and prayers were said, sending hope for peace on earth to all their gods and goddesses. The food was great grate, the tree plugged in, the meal had gone without a hitch, till Timmy turned to Amber and said, "Is it true that you're a witch?" His mom jumped up and said, "The pies are burning," and she hit the kitchen, and it was Jane who spoke. She said, "It's true, your cousin's not a Christian, but we love trees, we love the snow, the friends we have, the world we share, and you find magic from your God, and we find magic everywhere." So the Christians and the pagans sat together at the table, finding faith and common ground, the best that they were able. Now where does magic come from? I think magic's in the learning, 'cause now when Christians sit with pagans, only pumpkin pies are burning. Tried to do the dishes, her aunt said, "Really, no, don't bother." Amber's uncle saw how Amber looked like him and like her father. He thought about his brother, how they hadn't spoken in a year. He thought he'd call him up and say, "It's Christmas and your daughter's here." He thought of fathers, sons, and brothers, saw his own son tug his sleeve, saying, "Can I be a pagan?" Dad said, "We'll discuss it when they leave." So the Christians and the pagans sat together at the table, finding faith and common ground, the best that they were able, lighting trees in darkness, learning new ways from the old, and making sense of history and drawing warmth out of the cold.
Since 2001, like I said, we've been a mixed faith family. We have been a mixture of Christian and pagan and atheist and agnostic. In 2001, I began creating rituals for our family to do at the solstices and the equinoxes and the cross-quarter days in between. And because we're a mixed faith family, it made sense to find ways to incorporate Christian themes into our neo-pagan celebrations. So I wrote this ritual, which is really a kind of story/skit, when Katya was 9 and William was 12. I came up with this idea after reading a small book called Embracing Jesus and the Goddess by Carl Coleman. In the story that I wrote, the characters are the god Yahweh, played by me, the goddess Asherah, played by Ruth, and their 2 children, Jesus, played by William, and Magdala, played by Katya. Yahweh is the name of the Hebrew God in the Christian Old Testament and the Jewish Torah.
If you're not a fan of Eastern archaeology, you'll know that Asherah was a goddess worshipped in ancient Palestine as the wife of the Hebrew god Yahweh.
Jesus, of course, is the son of Yahweh.
And Magdala is a fictional character of Yahweh and Asherah. She is inspired by the biblical character of Mary Magdalene and by the books by Elizabeth Cunningham, the feminist author of The Passion of Mary Magdalene.
In the story, the children, Jesus and Magdala, each share 3 gifts with each other, and then they take the gifts and present them to their parents. The gifts remind them that they have more in common than they had thought.
Though it is written to be understandable to children, we think the themes may appeal to adults as well. We hope the meaning of the gifts of Jesus and Magdala will resonate with those who are Christian and pagan, as well as those who follow other faiths or none.
This is just one story about the goddess and the god. There are many stories, all of them a little bit different. It's not important which story is true. What is important is what each story has to teach us. In order to understand the whole truth, we must listen to all the stories.
Here's our story. In the beginning, there was a watery darkness, and the watery darkness was everywhere. And from the watery darkness there was born heaven and earth. And heaven and earth were male and female, God and Goddess. And they loved each other. And from their love was born all things, the sun and moon, plants and animals, and all of us, male, female, and non-binary. All children of the God and heaven and the earth goddess.
For a long time, people worshiped the God and the Goddess together. They celebrated their love. But there came a time when the God of heaven became jealous of the Goddess, for she loved all of creation. And the God of heaven made himself forget where he came from, and he declared, I have no mother, I have no wife, I am God alone. And his followers worshiped the God of heaven alone. And they punished anyone who worshiped the Goddess or any other gods. And God forgot about the importance of balance and told his followers that men were better than women because men looked like him. Women reminded him of the Goddess, who he wanted to forget.
But the Goddess was not completely forgotten. She was spoken of in the Bible as Asherah, the tree of life, and Sophia, which means wisdom, and Shekinah, which means the presence of God on earth.
Still, most people forgot the Goddess. For many centuries, her existence was only a rumor, one that had to be whispered. This lasted for a long time.
But from time to time, people would remember the Goddess, and they looked back in history and found her in many places, in statues made by cave people, in stories of ancient goddesses, in paintings of Mary, the Mother of God, and even in the Bible, hidden between the lines. And the worship of the Goddess returned. But the Goddess was angry. She had had enough, and she was tired of being forgotten. And she declared spiritual war on the religion of the God of heaven. She went even so far as to say that only women could worship her, because all men reminded her of the God of heaven. She really only wanted to be treated equally, but she had been ignored for so long, she forgot about the importance of balance. She had forgotten the love she once had for the God of heaven.
The children of the Goddess and the God were Jesus and Magdala. Now the God of heaven had told Jesus to stay away from the Goddess, and the Goddess had told Magdala to stay away from the God of heaven. And Jesus and Magdala were not allowed to play together. Sometimes some of the followers of Jesus and Magdala tried to talk to each other, but the God and the Goddess wanted none of it.
Eventually, Jesus and Magdala had had enough of their parents' stubbornness. They were tired of their parents fighting. They wanted to play together, and they were going to show their parents how to get along. They knew that the followers of both the Goddess and the God had important gifts to share with each other, if only they had had the chance.
It happened one day in the springtime, when the pagans celebrate the union of their Goddess and the God, and the Christians celebrate the rebirth of their God. Jesus and Magdala had a plan to bring each other 3 gifts that would heal the divide between the God of heaven and the Goddess of earth. Both Jesus and Magdala went in search of the perfect gifts which had special meaning to each of them.
When they came together again, they each brought their gifts with them. Magdala presented her gifts first. They were simple gifts, gifts which seemed ordinary, but were actually very meaningful.
The first gift Magdala brought forth was earth. And she said, "This is earth. It is the body of our mother, the Goddess." Some of the followers of the God of heaven have said that the earth and our bodies are not good, and only heaven is good. But with the gift of earth, the Goddess teaches us that everything we can see and touch and taste and smell, all of these things are good because they are part of the Goddess. And it teaches us that our bodies, which are made of earth, are good too, and we are part of the Goddess too.
And Jesus took the gift of earth and said, "Thank you. I will always remember the meaning of the gift of earth."
The second gift that Magdala brought forth was water in a chalice or cup. And she said, "This is water. The water is in a chalice. Both the water and the chalice are symbols of womanhood. The chalice symbolizes the womb in which our mothers carried us, and the water symbolizes the water of the womb in which we floated. Some of the followers of the God of heaven teach that God is only male, but with the gift of water and the chalice, the goddess teaches us that divinity is female too. She reminds women that there is a divine being who looks like them as well, and she teaches us that a god without a goddess is only half of the story.
And Jesus took the gift of water and said, "Thank you. I will always remember the meaning of the gift of water."
The third gift Magdala brought forth was a flaming candle. And she said, "This is fire." The fire burns like the divine spirit inside of all of us. Some of the followers of the God of heaven teach that only God has power and we are weak. The goddess teaches us that we can find the power we need inside of us. The fire also symbolizes anger and our right to be angry at injustice when some people hurt other people. The fire inspires us to fight for equality and justice.
And Jesus took the gift of fire and said, "Thank you. I will always remember the meaning of the gift of fire." And now it was Jesus' turn to share his gifts. The first gift Jesus brought forth was a star. And he said, "This is a star, like the one that appeared the night I was born. To the followers of the goddess is all the world, and the world is good. But sometimes it seems like the world is a harsh place that doesn't care about us. The star reminds my followers that God is always searching for them, reaching out to them, and trying to tell them how much he loves them."
And Magdala took the gift of the star and said, "Thank you. I will always remember the meaning of the gift of the star."
The second gift Jesus brought forth was broken bread. And he said, "This is my body. It is broken like my body was broken." Sometimes the followers of the goddess need the goddess to be strong because they need to feel strong. And they forget that God suffers too. But this broken bread reminds my followers that their God has suffered like they have, and he understands that their sadness and their pains.
And Magdala took the gift of broken bread and said, "Thank you. I will always remember the gift of broken bread."
The third gift Jesus brought forth was a wooden cross, and he said, "This is an empty cross. It is the symbol of a miracle." To the followers of the goddess is nature, and nature follows natural laws. One of those laws is that everything dies. But this cross reminds my followers that sometimes miracles can happen, small miracles and big miracles. Sometimes nature can seem to bend to the power of love.
And Magdala took the gift of the wooden cross and said, "Thank you. I will always remember the meaning of the gift of the wooden cross."
Now, Jesus and Magdala took each gift they were given, but they were not done. Magdala carried the gifts of Jesus to her mother, the goddess, and Jesus carried the gifts of Magdala to his Father, the God of heaven.
The first gift that Jesus presented to the God of heaven was the gift of earth. And Jesus explained to his Father the meaning of the gift of earth as Magdala had explained it to him.
And the God of heaven began to remember the goddess. And he said, "I remember the gift of earth, which the goddess gave to me long ago. I remember in the beginning I saw the earth, and I said it was good. I saw the bodies of the men and the women and the non-binary people who were created, and I said they were good. This was my gift too." And God took the earth and held it in his hands and smelled the life that dwelled inside it.
The second gift that Jesus presented was the gift of the water in the chalice. And Jesus explained to his father the meaning of the gift of water, as Magdala had explained it to him.
And the God of heaven continued to remember the goddess. And he said, I remember the gift of water which the goddess gave to me long ago. The water is the gift of birth, which is in cis women. It is also the gift of the second birth, the gift of starting over anew, which is symbolized by the waters of baptism. And this chalice which holds water, is also the cup which my followers drink from in memory of the blood of my Son every Sunday when they ask for the gift of being born again. This was my gift too. And God took the chalice and drank deeply of the water.
The third gift that Jesus presented was the gift of fire. And Jesus explained to his father the meaning of the gift of fire, as Magdala had explained it to him.
And the God of heaven remembered the goddess again. And he said, I remember the gift of fire, which the goddess gave to me long ago. It is the gift of the Spirit, which my followers call the Holy Ghost, which lives in the hearts of every person. It is the fire of the burning bush, which Moses saw. It is the fire which drove all of my prophets to fight for the poor and the needy, the widows and the orphans. This was my gift too. And God took the fire and placed it in his heart. And the God of heaven repented that he had forgotten the goddess, who he loved, and he went to look for her.
At the same time, Magdala was presenting the gifts of Jesus, to the goddess. The first gift that Magdala presented to the goddess was the gift of the star. And Magdala explained to her mother the meaning of the gift of the star, as Jesus had explained it to her.
And the goddess began to soften toward the God of heaven, and she said, the God of heaven did not completely forget me after all. This star is God's message to our children that he is always searching for them. When our children look up into the night sky, they see my body. It is full of stars, and each star has a different message for our children. For there are as many paths to me as there are stars in the sky. This was my gift too. And the goddess stretched forth her arm and placed the star in the sky amidst all the other stars.
The second gift that Magdala presented was the gift of broken bread. And Magdala explained it to her mother, the meaning of the gift of broken bread, as Jesus had explained it to her.
And the goddess softened towards the God of heaven a little more. And she said, the God of heaven did not completely forget me after all. The broken bread is the broken body of Jesus. This bread was made from grain, and grain was sown in the ground by the plow, which must break my body, the earth. And the earth which rises up must be cut down, so that the grain may be harvested. And the grain must be crushed, so the flour can be made. And the flour must be baked, so the bread can be made. All creation requires sacrifice. As Jesus suffered on the cross, so I suffer with all of creation, as it is born and lives and dies. This was my gift too. And the goddess took the bread and ate it.
The third gift that Magdala presented was the gift of the wooden cross. And Magdala explained to her mother the meaning of the gift of the wooden cross, as Jesus had explained it to her.
And the goddess softened towards the God of heaven more. And she said, the God of heaven did not entirely forget me. This empty cross is the symbol of the miracle of the resurrection, the miracle of life which follows death. This wooden cross was made from a tree. Every winter, the tree dies, and every spring it is born again. In the continuous miracle, which is the cycle of life and death and rebirth. This was my gift too. And the goddess stretched forth the cross, and its branches sprouted green leaves. And the goddess of the earth looked and saw the God who she had loved so long ago.
And the God of heaven looked, and he saw the goddess who he had loved so long ago. And they embraced each other again in love. And on that day, they were united again before all the children of heaven and earth, and there was rejoicing.
Yay!
Please join us now in singing All Creatures of the Earth and Sky, which was adapted from the hymn by St. Francis of Assisi, the most pagan of the Christian saints.
All creatures of the earth and sky, come kindred, lift your voices high. Alleluia, alleluia. Bright burning sun with golden beam, soft shining moon with silver gleam. Alleluia, 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 alleluia. Swift rushing winds so wild and strong, white clouds that sail in heaven along. Alleluia, alleluia. Fair rising morning, praise, rejoice. High stars of evening find a voice. Alleluia, 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 alleluia. Cool flowing water, pure and clear, make music for all life to hear. Alleluia, alleluia. Dance, flame of fire so strong and bright, and bless us with your warmth and light. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. Embracing earth, you day by day, bring forth your blessings on our way. Alleluia, all herbs and fruits that richly grow, let them the glory also show. Alleluia, 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 alleluia. All you of understanding heart, forgiving others, take your part. Alleluia, alleluia. Let all things now the holy bless, and worship God in humbleness. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia,
Now is the time in our service for our offering. We give to remind ourselves of how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and sacred space. We give with the faith that together we have enough. The PayPal link is on the screen, but is not clickable. A clickable link will be shared in the chat box. generosity and your service to this congregation, we thank you. Please join us now in extinguishing our chalice. The words are printed on your screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Our unmoderated coffee hour will begin in just one moment. Everyone will be unmuted to start, but please remember to mute yourselves when you are not speaking.